She was handcuffed and shamed until her son, the U.S. Attorney General, arrived. What he did next will change everything. The crisp autumn air of Chicago did little to cool the fire simmering within Clara Mae Johnson as she approached the Grand Cultural Center. At 72, every line of her designer suit, every strand of her perfectly coiffed hair, spoke of a life lived with purpose and dignity. Tonight she was an honored guest at the Justice for All charity gala. Her invitation a testament to decades of community service and generous philanthropy. But her path was abruptly blocked. "Move along, ma'am. You don't belong here," sneered Officer Kevin Miller, his towering frame a wall of hostility. Clara Mae's heart sank. "Officer, I'm attending the gala," she stated, her voice unwavering despite the insult. Miller scoffed, a cruel smirk twisting his lips. "Right. And I'm the mayor. Why don't you try the soup kitchen down the street?" Oh, the audacity. Clara Mae, ever composed, extended her embossed invitation. "Officer, please just look." But his prejudice was a blindfold. "Lady, I don't need to look at anything. I know your type." With a dismissive swipe, he scattered her VIP credentials across the cold pavement. 50 pairs of eyes watched, recording every agonizing second, sharing it instantly across the digital ether. They had no idea they were witnessing a man meticulously dismantle his own career. Had anyone ever seen such arrogance meet such a formidable match? This officer was making the gravest error of his life. Clara Mae Johnson did not flinch, though the sting of his words Williams grated on her ears. 72 years had brought harsher insults, but it still smarted. Officer Kevin Miller loomed over her, a 6'2" tower of raw, unchecked aggression. 8 years on the force, a mountain of complaints buried deep in his file. He'd been passed over for sergeant just last month. That searing rejection festered within him like an open wound, fueling his bitterness. His partner, Officer Amy Jenkins, shifted uncomfortably, a quiet witness to his escalating malice. 28 years old, only 3 on the job. Amy had seen Miller's brutal methods before. Each time, she'd rationalized, "It's not my place to interfere." And each time, a sliver of her self-respect chipped away. The Chicago Cultural Center, a magnificent edifice built in 1897, shimmered under the afternoon sun, ready to host the Justice for All Gala. 500 of Chicago's most influential citizens were gathering tonight to champion legal aid for underprivileged communities. Oh, the bitter irony. Clara Mae, who volunteered there monthly, teaching literacy to immigrant families, who was known by name to every security guard, and personally thanked by the event coordinator for her $50,000 donation, now stood handcuffed outside. "Officer, I truly believe there's been a misunderstanding," Clara Mae stated, her voice resonating with the quiet authority of someone who had commanded respect from challenging teenagers for decades. She reached into her purse with deliberate, almost defiant slowness, producing a cream-colored invitation embossed with elegant gold lettering. Miller wouldn't even glance at it. His prejudice was an unyielding automaton, running on pure bias. "I don't need to see any fake paperwork, lady," he snarled. Behind them, early arrivals began to gather. Eleanor Vance, 75, stepped out of her Bentley, her jaw dropping as she recognized Clara Mae. They served together on 3 charitable boards. Clara Mae remained outwardly calm, though her heart hammered against her ribs. She thought of Arthur, her late husband, a civil rights lawyer who had dedicated his life to justice. She thought of her 3 successful children, all thriving despite the systemic barriers they'd faced. Most of all, she thought of her youngest, Michael. Her phone buzzed again. A text message. "Mom, flying back from DC tonight. Can't wait to see you at the gala. So proud of everything you've accomplished, Michael." A faint smile touched her lips. Michael didn't know it yet, but he was about to receive a stark lesson in why his mother had raised him to confront injustice, wherever it dared to show its face. Miller noticed her smile, and it ignited a fresh rage in him. "You think this is funny? Trying to sneak into fancy parties where you don't belong?" Amy Jenkins finally found her voice. "Brad, maybe we should just check her." "Jenkins, stay in your lane." Miller's voice was a harsh warning. "I know trouble when I see it." The crowd swelled, phones blooming like digital flowers after rain. Social media notifications pinged relentlessly across the city. The hashtag Jan had Chicago Police started trending. Clara Mae's thoughts drifted to her students, How many times had she told them that true character was defined by how you responded to injustice? That dignity wasn't about being treated well, but about treating others well, no matter how they treated you. Tonight she was living her own lesson. Her VIP badge dangling clearly from her purse proclaimed Justice for All Gala. Honorary board member. Table 1. Miller's eyes swept right over it, seeing only what his ingrained prejudice permitted. Inside, event staff wondered about their missing guest of honor. Clara Mae Johnson was scheduled to deliver the opening remarks, her speech about grace under pressure waiting on the podium. Oh, the universe truly had a cruel sense of irony. Miller's radio crackled, dispatch, mentioning federal officials arriving, but he was too consumed by his target to truly listen. Important people were always in this part of Chicago, weren't they? Clara Mae checked her watch, 6:15 p.m. The gala started at 7. She had never been late for anything in her life. Her unwavering composure infuriated Miller more than any resistance would have. He was accustomed to people cowering, pleading, or fighting back. Clara Mae did none of these things. She simply stood there, radiating a quiet authority that made him feel inexplicably small. "Ma'am?" Amy tried again, her voice barely a whisper. "If you could just show us." "Officer Jenkins," Clara Mae said gently, her gaze steady. "I appreciate your professionalism. I am Clara Mae Johnson, and I am expected inside for the Justice for All Gala." Something in her tone made Amy look closer. The undeniable quality of her clothes, the self-assured confidence in her bearing, the precise way she articulated each word without a hint of condescension. This wasn't some desperate gatecrasher, but Miller had already made up his mind. "Enough games. Turn around and put your hands behind your back." A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers. Eleanor Vance stepped forward. "Officer, I can personally vouch for Mrs. Johnson. She is one of our most generous supporters." Miller spun around, his face contorted. "Ma'am, step back before I arrest you too." Eleanor retreated, but her phone was already out. Dialing the mayor's office directly, Clara Mae closed her eyes for a fleeting second, drawing strength. When she opened them, her gaze was resolute. "Officer Miller," she said, reading his name tag, "I want you to remember this moment. Remember how you chose to treat someone you knew nothing about, based only on your assumptions." Miller's hands moved instinctively to his handcuffs. "Turn around now." In her purse, Clara Mae's phone rang again. The caller ID flashed, "Michael, Attorney General." She considered answering. One word from her son, and this entire nightmare would end. But no, some lessons, she mused, could only be learned the hard way. "Empty your purse on the ground. Right now." Miller's voice cracked like a whip across the sidewalk. Clara Mae met his gaze, then surveyed the growing crowd of witnesses. Her dignity unshaken, she knelt gracefully, placing her designer handbag on the concrete. Its contents spilled out, a trove of evidence. Her engraved invitation, Justice for All Gala. Honorary board member Clara Mae Johnson. Table 1. Glinted in the light. Her official donor identification badge landed beside it. Gold lettering unmistakable. A laminated card identified her as a volunteer literacy instructor. Another, her Chicago Public Schools retirement credentials after 40 years of dedicated service. Her checkbook, open for all to see, revealed a balance that would make Miller's annual salary look like pocket change. Yet Miller wouldn't even glance down. "I bet you don't even belong in this neighborhood," he sneered, "let alone at some fancy gala with important people." The crowd thickened. An Instagram livestream already boasted 300 viewers, comments flooding in. "This is disgusting. Someone call the mayor. That lady looks like somebody's grandmother." Clara Mae rose slowly, her knees protesting. At 72, kneeling on concrete was painful, but she would never give Miller the satisfaction of seeing her wince. "Officer, I believe you're making a serious mistake," she said, her voice never wavering, using the same firm yet never harsh tone she'd used with disruptive students. Behind her serene exterior, her mind raced. She thought of Arthur, who had taught her that responding to hatred with hatred only deepened the darkness. Amy Jenkins stepped closer, finally looking at the evidence scattered on the sidewalk. Her training screamed at her. Something was terribly wrong here. This wasn't how arrests were supposed to happen. "Brad, maybe we get people like you trying to sneak into these events all the time." Miller cut her off, his voice rising, agitated. Fake invitations, stolen IDs, whatever it takes to get close to wealthy folks. Judge Olivia Reed pushed through the crowd. Officer, that woman is Clara Mae Johnson. She is a pillar of this community. Miller spun around, his face crimson. Ma'am, I don't care if she's the Queen of England. She's trespassing. The judge pulled out her phone, dialing the police chief directly, her fingers trembling with fury. Eleanor Vance joined her. I'm calling my husband. He sits on the police board. But Miller was beyond all reason now. The crowd, the phones, the witnesses, they only fueled his desperate need to assert control. Backing down, in his warped mind, meant admitting weakness. Clara Mae watched him, her gaze piercing. 40 years of dealing with troubled students had taught her to recognize someone spiraling out of control. Officer Miller, she said quietly, you still have time to make this right. It was precisely the wrong thing to say. Miller interpreted her calm as condescension, her grace as mockery. Turn around and put your hands behind your back. You're under arrest for attempted fraud, trespassing, and obstruction of justice. The crowd erupted in disbelief. This is insane, someone shouted. A woman began to cry. The live stream viewer count soared to 800. Clara Mae turned slowly, presenting her hands. The handcuffs clicked into place, a sound that sliced through the chaos like a gunshot. You have the right to remain silent, Miller began, his voice thick with a twisted triumph. Amy couldn't bear to watch. Brad, this is wrong. Look at the evidence. Look at her invitation. Jenkins, if you can't handle real police work, maybe find another job. The handcuffs bit too tightly into Clara Mae's wrists, her circulation beginning to slow, but she offered no complaint. She thought of Michael, likely in a meeting in Washington, utterly unaware his mother was being arrested on a Chicago sidewalk. As Miller led her toward the squad car, she passed Eleanor Vance. Their eyes met for a fleeting moment. Tell Michael what happened here, Clara Mae whispered. Miller shoved her into the back seat, harder than necessary. Her head hit the window, but she bit back a cry. Through the glass, she watched the crowd swell, more phones appearing. The live stream now had over 1,000 viewers across the nation. Clara Mae closed her eyes, doing what she always did in moments of crisis. She prayed, not for rescue, but for wisdom. Not for vengeance, but for justice. Behind her, Miller stood, a picture of triumphant ignorance, completely oblivious that he had just sealed his own fate. Her phone, still discarded on the sidewalk amidst her scattered belongings, buzzed again. Michael, Attorney General, flashed on the screen, then went dark. Some lessons, Clara Mae knew, could only be truly learned through bitter experience. And the hardest ones were still to come. Inside the squad car, Clara Mae sat, her hands cuffed behind her back, the metal digging into her wrists. Yet her face remained serene. Through the window, she watched the crowd grow to nearly 50 people. Her purse, its contents glinting in the late afternoon sun, lay abandoned on the concrete. Her phone buzzed incessantly. Michael calling, Michael calling, Michael calling. Miller kicked it aside. No calls for criminals. The Instagram live stream hit 2,000 viewers. Comments scrolled in a furious blur. This is America in 2024. That poor woman. Someone needs to stop this. The hashtag Justice for Clara Mae began trending in Chicago. Then, Amy Jenkins received a radio call that froze her blood. All units be advised. Attorney General Michael Johnson is en route to Chicago Cultural Center for the Justice for All Gala. ETA 15 minutes. Repeat, the U.S. Attorney General will be arriving shortly. Amy stared at the radio, then at Clara Mae in the back seat, then at Miller, who was now arguing with increasingly agitated witnesses. A horrifying suspicion began to take root in her mind. Brad, she called out, her voice trembling. We need to talk. But Miller was in full theatrical mode, basking in what he believed was his moment of supreme authority. Eleanor Vance approached the squad car, and through the glass, her eyes met Clara Mae's. Eleanor mouthed silently. I called the mayor. Clara Mae gave a slight nod, her dignity unbroken. Even in chains, a young man, phone raised, shouted, Ma'am, can you tell us your name? Clara Mae looked directly into the camera, her voice carrying clearly through the window. I'm Clara Mae Johnson. I've lived in Chicago I was a public school principal for 40 years, and I am a mother of 3 children who serve this country. The crowd fell silent, captivated by her words. by the quiet power in her tone. Miller overheard and stormed over. "Stop talking to the media." But Clara May continued, her voice steady. "I want everyone watching to remember this moment. Remember how quickly dignity can be stripped away, and remember that how we respond to injustice defines who we are." Black SUVs with government plates began to appear around the cultural center. Not one or two, but a convoy of 5, moving in perfect synchronized formation. Secret Service agents emerged, earpieces visible, scanning the area with practiced, efficient eyes. They were establishing a security perimeter, but still 2 blocks away. Miller remained utterly oblivious, too focused on controlling the agitated crowd to notice the federal presence materializing around him. Amy watched the SUVs with a growing cold dread. She pulled out her phone and Googled Attorney General Michael Johnson. The first image that appeared made her stomach drop. A tall, distinguished black man in his 40s, standing behind a podium emblazoned with the Department of Justice seal. She looked at Clara May in the car, then at the photo, then back at Clara May. The resemblance around the eyes was undeniable. "Oh my God," she whispered, the words catching in her throat. Professor David Carter, a black professor from Northwestern University, pushed through the crowd. He had taught Clara May's daughter, Sarah, in law school. He recognized Clara May instantly. "Clara May Johnson," he called out. "What in God's name is happening here?" Miller blocked his path. "Sir, step back. This is police business." "Police business?" Professor Carter's voice boomed. "That woman donated $500,000 to literacy programs in this city. She mentored my daughter through law school." The crowd erupted in a roar of support. "Let her go. This is ridiculous. She's done more for Chicago than any of us." The lead SUV pulled up directly in front of the cultural center, its license plate reading US DOJ 1. 2 Secret Service agents stepped out, striding purposefully toward the commotion. Miller still didn't connect the dots. His radio crackled again. "Units in vicinity of cultural center. Be advised, federal officials are securing the area for VIP arrival." Amy grabbed Miller's arm. "Brad, we need to release her now." "Are you insane? In front of all these people? I'd look like an idiot." "You're going to look a lot worse than an idiot if you don't listen to me." Judge Olivia Reed approached the police car, tapping on the window where Clara May sat. "Mrs. Johnson, I'm calling my colleague at the U.S. Attorney's office. This will be resolved shortly." Clara May shook her head gently. "Your Honor, sometimes the system needs to see its own failures clearly. Let this play out." The judge stared at her in amazement. Even in handcuffs, Clara May Johnson was thinking about justice as everyone, not just herself. A tall figure emerged from the lead SUV, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, moving with the confident, purposeful stride of someone accustomed to command. Federal agents flanked him, 50 yards away, then closer. His jaw was set, his eyes scanning the crowd, until they locked onto the police car where Clara May sat. His pace quickened. Amy saw him coming and desperately clutched Miller's shoulder. "Brad, look at that man walking toward us. Look at him closely." Miller glanced dismissively. "Some federal bureaucrat. So what? That's not just any federal official. That's..." But Miller cut her off, his eyes alight. He'd spotted a news van arriving, practically glowing with self-importance. "Finally, some real media coverage. They'll see how I handle this situation." The reporter, Sophia Riley from Channel 7, jumped out with her cameraman. She instantly recognized Clara May through the car window. "That's Clara May Johnson. She was Chicago Teacher of the Year 3 times. She's been featured in our Community Heroes segment twice." Her cameraman started rolling immediately. This was shaping up to be a major story. Amy made one last desperate attempt. She pulled out her phone and showed Miller the Google image of Attorney General Michael Johnson. "Brad, look at this photo. Look at the woman in our car. Look at that man walking toward us right now." Miller barely glanced at the screen. "Jenkins, you're being paranoid. Just some family resemblance." The man in the charcoal suit was 30 yards away now, his expression thunderous. Secret Service agents spoke rapidly into their earpieces. Clara May saw her son approaching and closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, they were filled with a poignant mix of love and sadness, not for herself, but for what her son was about to witness, for the world she'd tried to prepare him for. Inside her scattered purse, her phone rang one last time. But there was no need to answer it now. The education of Officer Kevin Miller was about to begin. Amy instinctively backed away from Miller. She recognized the look on the approaching man's face. It was the look of a son who had just seen his mother treated like a criminal. The crowd sensed something momentous was about to unfold. Conversations died away. Phones pointed in every direction. The live stream viewer count hit 5,000. Miller straightened his uniform, preparing to meet what he assumed was just another federal official who needed to be managed. He had no idea he was about to meet his worst nightmare. The man in the charcoal suit was 20 yards away. His eyes never left Clara May's face in the police car window. 10 yards, the moment that would change everything was seconds away. Miller turned toward the approaching figure, his most authoritative voice ready. "Sir, you need to step back. This is an active police scene." The man stopped directly in front of him. When he spoke, his voice carried the crushing weight of absolute federal authority. "Excuse me, officers." The words hung in the air, a thunderclap poised to strike. The man in the charcoal suit stood before Miller with the quiet confidence of someone who commanded federal law enforcement across the entire United States. His presence radiated an authority forged from years of prosecuting cases in the nation's highest courts. His voice held absolute power, but beneath it lay something far more dangerous: the controlled fury of a son watching his mother systematically humiliated. "I'm Attorney General Michael Johnson. That's my mother in your police car." The words hit the sidewalk like a nuclear explosion detonating in agonizing slow motion. A complete, suffocating silence descended over the entire scene. 50 witnesses, multiple television cameras, dozens of live streaming phones. Everything seemed to stop functioning. Even the ceaseless traffic noise of downtown Chicago faded into nothingness. Miller's face underwent a transformation that would be replayed millions of times across every social media platform imaginable. Confusion flickered across his features first, like a computer struggling to process impossible data. Then, slow recognition dawned, followed by absolute, gut-wrenching horror as reality crashed over him like a massive tsunami, obliterating everything in its path. His skin, flushed red moments before, turned deathly pale white in a matter of seconds. The live stream viewer count exploded past 10,000, climbing exponentially. Comments flooded in so fast they became an unreadable blur of outrage and sheer amazement. "Oh my God, this is insane. The Attorney General's mother? This cop is completely finished. Holy cow, the plot twist of the century." Amy Jenkins immediately moved toward the police car, her hands shaking violently as she fumbled desperately for her handcuff keys. Her training finally kicked in, the magnitude of their colossal mistake now crystal clear. "Miss Johnson, I am so deeply, deeply sorry for everything that happened here. Please, let me get these handcuffs off you immediately." But Clara May gently raised her hand from inside the car, somehow still commanding the moment despite being the victim. Even handcuffed and humiliated, she possessed a quiet authority that halted everyone in their tracks. "Officer Jenkins, I genuinely appreciate your professionalism throughout this entire ordeal. You showed discomfort with the situation, and that matters. But I want Officer Miller to remove these handcuffs himself. I want him to look directly into my eyes when he does it. I want him to see me as a human being." Michael Johnson stepped closer to Miller, who appeared to be struggling to breathe normally. The Attorney General's voice was carefully measured, each word chosen with the chilling precision of someone who had argued cases before the Supreme Court. "Officer Miller, I need you to understand something very clearly before we proceed any further. My mother is 72 years old. She spent 40 years as an educator in this city, shaping young minds and building futures. She has devoted her entire adult life to making Chicago better for everyone who lives here. And you handcuffed her on a public sidewalk because you decided, based on nothing but her appearance, that she didn't belong at a charity gala." Miller's hands trembled uncontrollably as he reached for his handcuff keys, his fingers barely able to function. "Sir, I mean Mr. Attorney General, I had no idea. She didn't tell me who she was." Michael's eyes narrowed with the intensity of a prosecutor cross-examining a hostile witness. "She didn't tell you what exactly, Officer Miller? That she's related to someone powerful? Should that matter in how you treat any American citizen? Should anyone have to prove their worth through their family connections before receiving basic human dignity? The crowd pressed closer, smartphones capturing every single word, every facial expression, every agonizing moment of this historic confrontation. This wasn't just going viral locally anymore. Major news outlets across the country were already breaking into regular programming with live footage from the scene. Clara May spoke from inside the police car, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade through silk. "Michael, sweetheart, I want you to ask Officer Miller a specific question for me." Michael turned back to Miller, who was now sweating profusely despite the cool October air. "Officer, my mother had a VIP invitation clearly marked with her name, official donor credentials, proper identification, and witness testimony from multiple respected community members. What additional evidence did you require before treating her like a criminal?" Miller fumbled desperately with the handcuff keys, his authority completely evaporated like morning mist. I thought the documents might be fake. We sometimes get people trying to what specifically, Officer Miller?" Michael's voice grew noticeably harder, taking on the icy tone he used when prosecuting federal crimes. "People like what?" "Officer Miller, please finish that sentence for everyone here." The question hung in the autumn air like a sword waiting to fall. Miller realized with growing horror that he was about to admit to racial profiling on camera, in front of the U.S. Attorney General with thousands of people watching the live stream in real time. Eleanor Vance stepped forward from the crowd, her voice carrying the undeniable authority of Chicago high society. "Mr. Attorney General, I witnessed this entire incident from the beginning. Your mother conducted herself with absolutely extraordinary grace while being treated shamefully by Officer Miller. She never once lost her composure, raised her voice, or responded with anything but dignity." Professor David Carter joined her, his academic credentials lending weight to his words. "Sir, Mrs. Johnson taught my daughter in law school that education was the most powerful path to justice. She spent decades fighting for civil rights through education and community service. What happened here today is unconscionable and goes against everything she's worked for." Judge Olivia Reed approached Michael directly, her judicial robes lending gravitas to the moment. "Michael, I've known your mother for over 20. Michael nodded respectfully to each witness, his professional demeanor remaining intact despite the intensely personal nature of the situation. He turned back to Miller, who had finally managed to unlock Clara May's handcuffs with hands that shook like lays in a storm. Clara May emerged from the police car slowly and deliberately, rubbing her wrists where the metal restraints had cut into her brown skin. The red marks were clearly visible, and every camera present captured the physical evidence of her mistreatment. But her first action wasn't to complain about her ordeal or demand immediate justice. It was to embrace her son with the profound love of a mother who had raised him to be better than his circumstances. "I'm so incredibly proud of you, Michael," she whispered in his ear, her voice carrying decades of maternal love. "But this situation isn't about me personally. This is about every single person who gets treated this way when there's no one important watching, no cameras recording, no one to speak up for them." Michael held his mother carefully, noting every detail of her treatment, the bruises forming on her wrists, the wrinkles in her expensive suit, the exhaustion in her eyes that came from enduring systematic humiliation. When he looked back at Miller, his expression had hardened into something that promised serious federal consequences. "Officer Miller, you're wearing a department-issued body camera, correct?" Miller nodded miserably, his entire career flashing before his eyes. "Yes, sir, I am." "Excellent," Michael stated, his voice now a steel trap, "because what happened here today violated multiple federal civil rights statutes. You arrested an American citizen without probable cause, ignored clear and convincing evidence of her legitimacy, and treated her with deliberate disrespect based on nothing more than your personal prejudices and assumptions." The crowd erupted in sustained applause that echoed off the surrounding buildings. The live stream comments exploded with celebration and demands for immediate justice and accountability. Michael continued, his voice now carrying the full, unyielding authority of the United States Department of Justice. "Officer Miller, I need you to understand that this incident isn't just about my mother. As much as I love and respect her, according to your own department's internal affairs statistics, citizen complaints against you show a clear and documented pattern of targeting minority citizens for aggressive enforcement. This pattern of behavior ends today." Amy Jenkins stepped forward from her position near the police car, her face pale, but her voice now determined. "Mr. Attorney General, I need to formally report that I observed Officer Miller's behavior throughout this incident and failed to intervene properly according to my training and oath. I accept full responsibility for my inaction and failure to protect Mrs. Johnson. Clara May looked at Amy with something approaching genuine approval. Officer Jenkins, you showed visible discomfort with this situation from the beginning. That discomfort is the beginning of integrity and moral courage. The next step is learning to act on that discomfort before innocent people get hurt. Michael pulled out his personal cell phone and dialed a number from memory. The crowd could hear his side of the conversation with perfect clarity. Superintendent Richardson, this is Attorney General Michael Johnson. I'm standing outside the Cultural Center where 2 of your officers just arrested my 72-year-old mother for the crime of trying to attend a charity gala while black. Even from several feet away, witnesses could hear the superintendent's voice rising in alarm and panic through the phone speaker. Yes, I said my mother. Yes, the entire incident is recorded on video. Yes, it's already going viral across the internet. We need to discuss Officer Miller's immediate suspension and the initiation of a federal civil rights investigation. I'll be in your office within the hour to review his complete personnel file. He hung up and addressed Miller directly, his prosecutorial instincts taking complete control. Officer, you have a choice to make right now, today, this moment. You can either learn from this experience and commit to becoming a better police officer who serves all citizens equally, or you can continue down a path that will completely destroy your career and cause immeasurable harm to your community. What happened here today can never ever happen again. Miller looked like he was about to physically collapse under the immense weight of his mistake. Sir, I honestly don't know what to say. I made a terrible, inexcusable mistake. Clara May stepped forward, her dignity somehow completely intact despite everything she'd endured in the past hour. Officer Miller, you didn't make a mistake. The mistake is accidental, unintentional. You made a conscious choice. You chose to see me as inherently suspicious because of my skin color. You chose to ignore concrete evidence that contradicted your prejudiced assumptions. You chose to humiliate me in public rather than treat me with basic human dignity. Her words cut deeper than any shouting or cursing ever could. Miller's face began to crumble with the full, crushing realization of what he'd done. But Clara May continued, her voice carrying the profound wisdom of 7 decades of life experience. You also have a choice available to you right now. You can choose to honestly examine your unconscious biases. You can choose to treat every citizen with dignity regardless of their appearance. You can choose to be part of the solution instead of perpetuating the problem. The crowd was absolutely mesmerized by her grace under pressure. Even in complete victory, with the full power of federal law enforcement behind her, she was still trying to teach, still trying to heal, rather than seeking revenge or retribution. Sophia Riley from Channel 7 approached with her cameraman, recognizing the historic nature of this moment. Mrs. Johnson, can you tell our viewers how you maintained such incredible composure during this entire ordeal? Clara May looked directly into the camera lens, speaking to the nation. My late husband Arthur used to tell me that dignity isn't about how others choose to treat you. It's about how you choose to respond when they treat you poorly. I chose to respond with grace, because hatred and anger only create more hatred and anger. Someone has to break the cycle. Michael placed his arm protectively around his mother's shoulder. My mother taught all her children that real strength isn't about the power you hold over others. It's about how you use whatever power you have to protect those who can't protect themselves. The live stream viewer count had exploded past 50,000 and continued climbing rapidly. Major news networks were running breaking news alerts across every platform. U.S. Attorney General's mother arrested in shocking display of police racial bias. Miller made one final desperate attempt to salvage something from this disaster. Mrs. Johnson, I want you to know that I'm truly sorry for everything. I let my prejudices control my actions, and there's absolutely no excuse for that kind of behavior. Clara May studied his face carefully for a long moment, searching for genuine sincerity beneath the fear and regret. After what felt like an eternity, she nodded slightly. Officer Miller, apologies are completely meaningless without fundamental changes in behavior. I sincerely hope this experience teaches you something important about the tremendous power you hold as a police officer and the enormous responsibility that comes with that power. The power had shifted completely and irreversibly. Justice, delayed but absolutely not denied, was finally being served in full view of the world. Michael addressed the crowd, which had swelled to over 100 people. his voice carrying the authority of his office, but also the burning passion of personal conviction. What happened here today represents both the absolute worst and the inspiring best of America. The worst when prejudice and abuse of power go completely unchecked. The best when ordinary citizens refuse to stay silent and stand up for what's morally right. The applause was thunderous, echoing off the surrounding buildings like rolling thunder. People were openly crying, cheering, recording video messages of support to post online. The hashtag Dignity Matters was now trending nationally, with posts flooding in from across the country, sharing similar experiences and demanding systemic change. Secret Service agents efficiently created a secure pathway for Michael and Clara May to enter the cultural center. Despite everything, the Justice for All Gala was about to begin, and Clara May still intended to deliver her scheduled keynote speech about grace under pressure, a topic that had suddenly become agonizingly relevant. As they walked toward the ornate entrance, Clara May turned back to look at Miller one final time. He stood completely alone now, his partner having strategically distanced herself, the crowd having moved away from him as if he were radioactive. He looked broken, defeated, and somehow physically smaller than he had appeared just an hour ago when he was wielding his authority like a weapon. "Officer Miller," she called out, her voice somehow carrying clearly across the busy sidewalk despite the chaos around them. He looked up with something resembling desperate hope in his eyes. "Remember this feeling you're experiencing right now," she urged. "Remember how it feels to have your entire world turned upside down in a single instant. Then, remember that you have the power to ensure that no other citizen ever feels the way you made me feel today." Miller nodded slowly, visible tears forming in his eyes for the first time since this ordeal began. Inside the cultural center, the transformation was immediate and striking. Clara May and Michael were greeted with a sustained standing ovation from the 500 distinguished guests who had followed the events outside through social media and breaking news reports. The applause continued for nearly 2 full minutes, with guests wiping away tears and offering heartfelt words of support and admiration. The event organizer, Isabella Morales, approached them with genuine emotion. "Ms. Johnson, after what you've just endured, no one would blame you if you wanted to go home and rest. Your speech can certainly be rescheduled." Clara May shook her head firmly, her resolve stronger than ever. "Isabella, what happened outside is exactly why this speech needs to be given tonight. Sometimes the universe provides perfect timing for important lessons." 20 minutes later, Clara May took the podium to address the gala attendees. Her speech, originally titled "Grace Under Pressure," had been profoundly modified by the day's events. Her voice was steady, her presence commanding, her message more powerful than ever. "Ladies and gentlemen, an hour ago, I was handcuffed on the sidewalk outside this building, not because I committed any crime, but because someone looked at me and decided I didn't belong in your company." The room was absolutely silent, hanging on her every word. But I want to talk about Officer Amy Jenkins, who showed discomfort with the situation, but initially lacked the courage to act. By the end of our encounter, she found that courage. She apologized. She reported her partner's misconduct. She chose growth over comfort. Clara May paused, letting her words sink in. "And I want to talk about Officer Kevin Miller, who made terrible choices based on prejudice, but who also in the end showed genuine remorse. Redemption is possible for everyone, but only if we're willing to do the hard work of examining our biases and changing our behavior." The audience was captivated by her message of hope, despite having every right to speak from anger. "My son, Michael, could have used his power to destroy Officer Miller's career tonight. Instead, he says this moment to push for systemic reform that will prevent this from happening to others." That's the difference between revenge and justice. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. Videos of her speech immediately went viral, shared millions of times with captions like, "This is how you respond to injustice," and "Grace Under Pressure personified." Meanwhile, outside the building, the consequences were swift and comprehensive. Within 2 hours of the incident, Officer Miller was officially suspended pending a full internal affairs investigation. The Chicago Police Department announced mandatory bias training for all officers to be implemented immediately. Amy Jenkins voluntarily met with internal affairs investigators, providing a complete and honest account of Miller's pattern of behavior. Her cooperation led to the discovery of previous incidents that had been inadequately investigated, She was placed on administrative review but commended for her eventual courage in speaking up. Federal prosecutors from Michael's office arrived to begin a civil rights investigation. Miller's body camera footage, combined with dozens of civilian videos, provided overwhelming evidence of civil rights violations. The case would proceed through federal court. The broader impact spread rapidly across social media and news networks. The incident became a case study in police departments nationwide. Clara May's composed response became required viewing in conflict resolution training programs. Miller, facing federal charges and the end of his law enforcement career, entered counseling to address his unconscious biases. In a letter released through his attorney, he stated, "Mrs. Johnson showed me more grace than I deserved. I have a lot of work to do to become the person she believed I could be." Amy Jenkins applied for a transfer to the Community Policing Division, where her newfound commitment to intervention and accountability made her an effective advocate for police reform within the department. Eleanor Vance and other witnesses used their social influence to support Clara May's proposed Dignity in Policing initiative, which received bipartisan support from city council members who had watched the incident unfold online. 3 months later, the Chicago Police Department implemented the Clara May Johnson Protocol, a comprehensive program requiring officers to document clear probable cause before any arrest and providing immediate review processes for citizen complaints. Judge Olivia Reed officiated at a ceremony where Amy Jenkins received recognition for her courage in reporting misconduct, despite the personal and professional risks involved. Professor David Carter established the Clara May Johnson Fellowship for young people pursuing careers in civil rights law, funded by donations that poured in from viewers inspired by her response to injustice. The viral video compilation showing Clara May's arrest, followed by the revelation of Michael's identity, became one of the most watched justice videos in internet history. Comments consistently praised not her son's power but her own dignity and grace. Miller eventually pleaded guilty to federal civil rights violations. At his sentencing hearing, he read a letter from Clara May advocating for rehabilitation over purely punitive measures. He received probation and community service, working with the same literacy programs Clara May had supported for decades. The Justice for All Gala raised a record-robbing $2.8 million, with donors specifically citing Clara May's example as their motivation for giving. 6 months after the incident, Clara May and Amy met for coffee. Amy, now working effectively in community policing, thanked Clara May for showing her what real courage looked like. "You taught me that being uncomfortable with injustice isn't enough," Amy confessed. "You have to act, even when it's difficult." Clara May smiled. "Especially when it's difficult. That's when character truly reveals itself." The system didn't just punish wrongdoing. It learned, grew, and changed. Clara May's grace under pressure created ripples of positive transformation that continued spreading outward, touching lives and changing hearts across the country. Justice was served, but more importantly, souls were saved. 1 year later, Clara May Johnson stood before a packed auditorium at Northwestern University, delivering the annual Civil Rights Lecture. Behind her, a projection screen displayed the iconic image that had changed everything: her emerging from that police car with dignity intact, while her son, the Attorney General, watched with protective love and righteous anger. That day on the sidewalk she began, her voice carrying the wisdom of 73 years. "I had a choice. I could respond with anger, with hatred, with a desire for revenge, or I could respond with something more powerful, grace." The audience was silent, captivated by the woman who had become a symbol of dignity under pressure. "I didn't respond with grace because I'm some kind of saint," she clarified. "I responded with grace because my late husband, Arthur, taught me that dignity is the one thing no one can take away from you, unless you give it to them. Officer Miller could handcuff my wrists, but he couldn't handcuff my spirit." She paused, looking out at faces of every color and background. "The real question isn't what happened to me that day. The real question is, what are you going to do when you witness injustice? When you see someone being treated unfairly because of their race, their age, their appearance, their accent, their circumstances?" In the audience, Amy Jenkins, now Sergeant Jenkins, head of the Chicago Police Department's Community Engagement Division, nodded thoughtfully. Beside her sat Kevin Miller, who had completed his federal probation and now worked as a counselor, helping other officers address their unconscious biases. "My son, Michael, used his power as Attorney General to seek justice," Clara May continued, But real change didn't come from his position alone. It came from ordinary people who refused to stay silent. It came from Eleanor Vance using her social connections to demand accountability. It came from Professor Carter speaking up for what was right. It came from every person who recorded that incident and shared it, saying, "This is not acceptable." Clara May clicked to the next slide, showing settings that made the audience shift uncomfortably. Every day in America, someone is profiled, dismissed, or mistreated because of assumptions others make about them. The Department of Justice reports that incidents like mine happen thousands of times each year, most without cameras, most without witnesses willing to speak up, most without someone powerful to intervene. She clicked again. The screen showed a map of the United States dotted with hundreds of red markers. But here's what gives me hope. Since that day outside the Cultural Center, over 300 police departments across the country have implemented dignity training programs. 47 states have passed legislation requiring bias awareness education for law enforcement. And most importantly, thousands of ordinary citizens have found the courage to speak up when they witness injustice. The final slide appeared. The Clara Bay Johnson Foundation, Teaching Dignity, Demanding Justice. We've established programs in schools, police departments, and community centers across the nation, not to teach people to be victims, but to teach them to be upstanding, to recognize that every interaction we have with another human being is an opportunity to choose dignity over prejudice, understanding over assumption. Clara May's voice grew stronger, more passionate. Officer Miller learned that day that his badge didn't give him the right to treat me as less than human. But more importantly, Officer Jenkins learned that staying silent in the face of injustice makes you complicit in that injustice. Her courage to finally speak up saved not just my Giddentis, but potentially countless other citizens from similar treatment. She looked directly into the cameras recording her speech for national broadcast. So here's my challenge to everyone watching this. I want you to think about a time when you witnessed unfairness. Maybe in a store, maybe at work, maybe in your own neighborhood. Did you speak up? Did you act? Or did you tell yourself it wasn't your place? It wasn't your problem? The auditorium was completely silent except for the sound of people shifting in their seats, examining their own consciences. The next time you see someone being treated unfairly, remember that your voice matters. Your action matters. Your refusal to accept injustice matters. You don't need to be an attorney general to demand justice. You just need to be a human being who believes that every person deserves dignity. Clara May Johnson smiled, the same serene expression she wore in handcuffs that day. True power isn't about the position you hold or the title after your name. True power is about standing up for what's right when it would be easier to stay silent. True power is choosing grace over hatred, justice over revenge, healing over division. She paused for her final word. My late husband Arthur used to say that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. But I want to add this. Justice anywhere is hope for justice everywhere. Be someone's hope. Be someone's voice. Be someone's dignity when they can't defend their own. The standing ovation lasted 10 minutes. Change, it turns out, really can start with a single moment of choosing grace over hatred. The revolution of dignity had begun.